children. The youngest is 9, and she was adopted at 2 out of an orphanage and has adoption trauma in her background. And every day is a new day for these children to wake up like it's the first day of their lives. And they've never gotten themselves ready for school before, and they don't know that they need to grab their shoes, and they don't know that they need to grab their lunch boxes. So the family has real lives. People have to get to school on time. The mom works at the school. She has to be there early. She has to be there on time. I'm sure this sounds familiar to a lot of you. So the mom has to get snippy a lot of mornings. And getting snippy and talking harshly causes the youngest to spiral, go into a trauma response a lot of the time. She does have some insecurities around unconditional love, which is understandable. And on these particular mornings, the mom has to grab the child, grab the backpack, walk to the car, put her in the car, buckle her in, get in the car, drive to school, unbuckle her, get her out, walk into the school, and that's where she works, and that's how the day starts. That's how the child's day starts. That's how the child's day starts before her day of school, and that is how the mom's day starts before her day of work. Same family, but this time they are leaving on a road trip, and the mom says, "Hey, everyone needs to use the restroom before we hit the road." And the youngest says, "I don't need to." But said youngest is notorious for only needing to when there's no toilets around. So the mom says, "No, you have to, let's go." And in doing so, this upsets her. She, again, has issues surrounding feeling singled out, feeling different. And so she walks inside with the mom and sits on the toilet, and an iron rod develops up her back. And it becomes a battle of the wills. And the child says, "I'm not going." And the mom says, "We can sit here and wait." And through the course of the child sort of going into a mild trauma response, she starts to say, "You have no idea how hard my life is. You weren't adopted. You have no idea how hard my life is." And this time, the mom chooses to respond with validation. And she says, "You are right. I don't know how it feels. You are right. I have never been in your shoes." And with that validation, the iron rod softens, and said child may or may not have used the restroom, but the mom just decides that's fine. They will just pull over on the side of the road if they have to. And it ends much more peacefully. So, as you probably gathered, both of those stories are me. And recently. And I feel that, so obviously the second story was me handling it appropriately and from a trauma-informed nature. And I feel that with my trauma-informed background, I am capable of handling situations from a trauma-informed perspective about 80% of the time. And that's not perfect, but it is good. And I do know that that number would be a lot lower if I had not taken the time to educate myself like you guys are all today. I will give you a quick background on my family, so you have some context for the rest of my presentation. This is my family. My husband and I have 2 biological children. They look like they're twins, but the daughter is 13, the son is 11, and our youngest, Ava, who I'm going to refer to a lot during this presentation, was adopted out of an orphanage in China when she was 2 years old. She was in Guangzhou, which is a huge city in South China by Hong Kong. And like I mentioned, she was in an orphanage. A couple of years ago, I decided that I needed to do better for her and educate myself for her. And I went actually online, but I got my master's degree from Columbia professors, and they allowed me to take this education program and twist it into exactly what I needed, which was focusing heavily on adoption trauma and writing my papers about that and studying that. I found TBRI through that through the master's program when I was doing writing some papers on, of course, like research that other people had done. And I found TBRI, and it's really caught my eye because it is one of the only, possibly the only, intervention model that is geared very, very specifically to adoptive parents. It's easy, relatively speaking. It's only 3 steps, and once you get the hang of it, it kind of more feels like common sense. Once you've practiced it and gotten the hang of it, it makes so much sense. So it's not hard to, there's nothing to memorize or anything like that. It was developed by 2 child psychologists in 1999 at TCU. They saw a big need to fill a void in intervention, and an intervention model needed for adoptive parents. So I will be asking, I'm so happy when I got here and I saw that this was a pretty intimate room, because throughout the presentation, I'm going to be asking, like, does anyone have an example of something they would like to share? Because I do know that hearing other people talk about maybe, a few sentences, so we don't have time, but something that they've experienced in this category might set up a light bulb in someone else's head that maybe my examples won't. So I would love for people to share if you can think of something. All right, so these photos will come into play later in my presentation. I'll refer back to them. When we got a call from our adoption agency and were matched with Ava, the agency worker said to us, "Great news, she's in Guangzhou, which is a huge city. Huge city equals money, and money in the orphanage world equals resources." So they said, this is great news. She's in an orphanage that has great resources, and what does resources equate to in the adoption world? So it equates to a decent caregiver to child ratio, which is huge. I'll never forget, probably the fact that stuck with me the most through my master's program is between ages 0 to 3, a child's brain develops 1 billion synapses per second, night and day. I have to repeat that because I think about it all the time. 1 billion synapses per second, night and day. So the fact that my child had attachment to someone and had one-on-one attention, I mean, they're doing an art project here, are you kidding me? That's probably more than I've done at home a lot of times. The fact that she had attachment with a caregiver for those first 2 years meant that she had developed billions and billions and trillions and zillions of synapses in her brain, so that when we adopted her, those synapses already existed. So yes, it was traumatic for her. Yes, she cried. It was horrible to leave her caregivers, and she was confused and she was scared. But those synapses, those pathways already existed. So she attached to us quickly because she already had the pathways in her brain. All right, I just had to throw this one in here. I'm actually not going to refer back to that, but I mean, that is an orphanage. Like, that's just an example of the resources that this orphanage had. Now, I will add that there are bars on the windows, and I am a witness to the fact that there were rats on the playground and in the hallways. So, it's still an orphanage. But it is pretty dang cute, and it certainly had a lot of resources. All right, this photo I snapped myself, and those are my 2 older children when they were younger. They're standing next to the bed that we were told was Ava's. Before I became trauma informed, I saw this room and I took this photo, and I didn't see it through the lens of being trauma informed. I saw this and I went, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? Her own bed and blankets on the beds and stuffed animals? Wow, what an amazing situation. And then years later, see is 10 kids' beds in a room with no adult bed. So I'm going to assume it was Lord of the Flies in this room every night. I'm going to assume they were locked in, right? They couldn't have them wandering outside. So I'm going to assume the children were locked in. And I also see a huge window with natural light coming through with only sheets pulled to the side. This photo I'm going to refer back to when I'm talking about the first pillar of TBRI and how sleep disturbances can come into play for adoptees. Because I know it's been a puzzle piece for me. I'm going to talk a lot about puzzle pieces. Puzzle pieces are little tiny bits of history you can read out about your child that will help you identify their triggers, which will then help you to walk them through a trauma response. So this was one of my puzzle pieces in figuring out her sleep disturbances and why she acts the way that she does a lot of the time. Okay, last on this page, I'm going to play this video. The sound's coming out of here. I didn't switch it up to TV, but it's pretty loud. So I'm going to play this video, and I want everyone to listen very closely to the first 2 to 3 seconds. It's only 5 seconds long. To the first 2 to 3 seconds, and keep in your mind what you hear. Can you hear that? I'll play it one more time real quick. All right. I'm going to refer back to that video as well on a future slide, but try to remember what you heard in those first couple seconds, which again, just like the video, or just like the picture of the beds, I didn't pick up on. When that video was sent to us before we went to China to pick up Ava, I did not see it through a trauma-informed lens, and I thought, oh my gosh, she's in warm clothes, she has a little toy, she has a friend, there's caregivers surrounding her, talking to her. All of that is so excellent, but a few years later, I heard that video again, and I picked up on something I hadn't heard the first time. All right, so my focus of my presentation today is to discuss with you guys what real life trauma responses look like in a real family with real time constraints and school and jobs and other family members, and talk about real life application, because you can read about trauma responses in TBRI in textbooks, you can learn about it on TikTok or social media, but until you are living it in your own home, they are harder to identify than you think, and they look a lot different than you expect. So, getting right into the meat of TBRI, the first pillar is empowerment. Empowerment in this sense refers to safety and felt safety. Once I related TBRI to Maslow's triangle of needs, I can't unsee it now. The two go hand in hand. They are married to me in my brain forever. So, first pillar refers to safety and felt safety. These are the bottom two levels of Maslow's triangle. If you look, the very, very bottom triangle is our core physiological needs. Oxygen, food, water, shelter, clothing, and sleep. Which again is one of those little puzzle pieces I'll refer back to. The orange level, the next level up, is felt safety. It's more of a felt safety. Now to children, particularly children with trauma in their background, felt safety is equally as important as safety. So can we as humans be safe physically, but not feel safe? Absolutely. Particularly if you're a child, and particularly if you have trauma in your background. So this level right here is family, employment, health, things that, those are more geared towards adults, but things that help us as humans feel safe, all right? Both are equally as important. When you have a child who is either, and I'm talking both short-term and long-term with this. If you have a child who is adopted and you're going to apply TBRI sort of over the course of their entire lives, and then TBRI also is applicable in tiny little spurts as they're having trauma responses in real life, and it just looks like really poor behavior. Okay, so
so you're establishing the first pillar first. The pillars of TBRI must go in order. Because just like Maslow's triangle of needs, you have to start at the bottom and move up. So a person who does not have their physiological needs met cannot feel safe, which means they then cannot create an emotional connection. And then we go on from there, which I'll get to in a minute. So let's talk about the ways that creating safety and felt safety, let's talk about how it actually looks in a real family with real adopted children and real life, right? We're going about real life. Oftentimes in adoptees, there is food insecurity. It's hard to find an adopted child who's either been in the foster system, pulled out of a home for maltreatment, or in an international orphanage setting who does not have food insecurity in their past. So even though in my daughter's case, even though food insecurity meant, even though resources at her orphanage meant that she didn't have severe food insecurity, she still was not eating on demand. She still wasn't getting snacks when she was hungry. She still was only eating rice and veggies. So food insecurity is very, very common in adoptees. And I know a lot of children get hangry. People joke, actually not even children, a lot of people get hangry. But in children with food insecurity in their pasts, getting hangry looks a little bit different, right? I mean, people relate to that. Getting hangry means trauma responding. It means, in my circumstance, in my own home, a child who starts to say really nasty things to me and really rude, hurtful things. And if I wasn't trauma informed, I would just think she was being really, really proud. But since going through my program, when she starts to act like that, her trauma responses are a hybrid of fight, flight, and freeze. It's never going to be, this is why, again, it's so important to learn and to continue learning, because we learn about trauma, fight, flight, and freeze in the sense of a bear chasing us. That's not what it looks like in adoptees. It's a combination of fight, which in my case, in my household, looks like her saying really rude things to me, and flight, sort of disassociating from the situation, going vacant, not responding, and freeze, sort of the same thing, not responding, going almost kind of vacant, and freezing up, right, literally, physically. So when my child begins to say rude things to me or get defiant, I now think, what does she need right now? And there's a lot of times when I realize that she hasn't eaten in a few hours. You'd think as a mom of 3, I would be a little better about carrying meat sticks in my purse or something like that, but I always seem to forget. And so where my children without trauma in their background can say to me, I'm hungry, can I please have a snack? My child with trauma in her background cannot do the same. And instead she goes into a trauma response. And it just looks like really, really bad behavior. But I now know that I need to catch myself, not get frustrated with her, and fill one of these physiological needs that she's having. Real quick, a way that adoptive parents oftentimes can help their child through food insecurity is when a child's brain is on fire, telling them, so there are billions and trillions and zillions of synapses in those early years developed, telling them, when I am hungry, I will not get food. When I am hungry, I don't know if I will get food. So those don't just disappear when they get adopted. I mean, through neuroplasticity, they might get pruned off and weaned off through, it takes years and years and years, and they may never, they may be there to stay. So as an adoptive parent, helping your child through a trauma response from food insecurity can look like keeping snacks in your car, keeping snacks in your purse, at school, speaking to admin and teachers and saying, hey, this is her background. Can you have a little bowl of snacks that she can see with her eyes behind your desk that she knows she has access to? No teacher would say no to that. So that's a way that adoptive parents can help their child through food insecurity. Next one, sleep disruptions and for adoptees. So sleep disruptions, I'm gonna go back to this photo right here. And I realized when I looked at this through a trauma-informed lens, no one was sleeping. As parents, we know that creating an environment for your children to get good rest and enough of it is actually hard. It takes a lot of effort, right? And planning your schedule around bedtimes and keeping the house quiet in the nighttime, all of it takes a lot of effort. So children who are in maltreated homes with maltreatment, or in an orphanage are likely not getting enough rest. They are likely not set up for success. And then tied with that is also darkness triggers. Perhaps a child either had a parent with substance abuse in the home, and nighttime was when that child or that parent would always stumble in and knock over furniture and start fighting with people and yelling at people. Or maybe they were molested in the dark in their previous home. Darkness triggers are real, and they're very, very common for adoptees. So with both sleep disruptions and triggers, finding out as much information as you can, which I know is very complicated. In my case, I have like 10 photos. That's it. That's all I have to go off of. But finding out as much as you can about your child's past, and then using those puzzle pieces to figure out what you can do to soothe their brains at night is helpful. That might, for some children, that might look like a bedroom of their own for the first time in their lives, with the hall light on, the door wide open, and a night light. That might be what makes them feel comfortable. For other children, it might be sharing a bedroom with someone. Maybe they don't feel comfortable alone. For other children, it might be a locked door, right? If it's a preteen or a teenager who is abused in the night, maybe a locked door is what they need. But so in my house, in my circumstances, Ava was, again, photo of 10 toddlers in a room. I don't know who in here has shared a hotel room with their children. Now imagine just 10 toddlers in a room. So in my house, what Ava needs is sleep. She is 9, and I am still living in baby jail. About 7:30, she starts to get tired and trauma respond. This happened last weekend, and when it happened, I thought, ooh, perfect, I'll have to work that into my presentation. Last weekend, we had family in town for Thanksgiving, and we went to an NBA game, and it was really fun, and we had nosebleed seats, and we didn't care. And it started at 7:30, and Ava's almost 10. I kind of just felt like, with cousins and things like that, I felt like she would be able to handle it. And about 8, she starts saying to me, I don't even like basketball. I don't even know why you brought me here. This is stupid. I don't even play basketball. Our seats are terrible. I can't even see. And my first inclination as a mother is to say, you are being a spoiled rotten rat. I mean, I don't think I went to any NBA games as a child, right? So my first inclination is annoyance. And you are being a spoiled rotten rat. And that is absolutely what I would have said to her had I not helped myself be trauma informed. But I instead took a deep breath. I had no resources to me available at that time to get her sleep. We were an hour away from home, and we were in 2 cars with like 12 people. So there was nothing I could do. I could not whisk her out of the situation. I could not take her home. If we had been 10 minutes from home and we had 2 cars, I would have just told my husband to stay with, our older 2 kids. So sometimes the only thing you can do is what I did, which is not get mad, and I just put my arm around her and I ignored her. And from a trauma-informed perspective, that's not the best thing to do. Ignoring is not the best thing to do. But when when you are in a situation with no resources available, ignoring is better than getting mad. So I put my arm around her, and I shrugged it off that my 9-year-old was telling me our seats were terrible. And that she doesn't even like basketball, and this was so stupid. And I shrugged it off, and I just ignored her. And she had just eaten right before that, and the food kicked in after about 15 minutes, and her attitude did improve. So she pulled herself out of the trauma response, but that was the best I could do. And sometimes that is the best you can do. Does anyone have an example of a physiological safety or felt safety need that they can think of that their child has exhibited a trauma response over, probably more than once?
So our daughter's 15. She is kind of battling. She has food insecurity from her past, but also she's battling like not wanting to eat because she's having self-image issues. So what we do is like she will only eat whenever she feels like she really has to. So we make dinner, do whatever we have to, but the kitchen's always open, so we can kind of see our kitchen through our bedroom door, and we'll make dinner. She won't hardly touch it, and then an hour or so later, she'll come down and make herself a whole nother dinner, and it's just like that's what she needs because she won't eat if she feels like self-conscious, but whenever her actual hunger kicks in, she knows she has food available, and if she needs something, then we will make her food then, but normally she tries to be sneaky. But we just allow her to have that access because we know that it has to be on her time as a teenager, but also on her time as someone who has that food.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and I feel like if you guys were not trauma informed, you would maybe be trying to force her into, hey, this is unacceptable, you have to eat the same time we do as a family, right? That would be maybe what you would think if you weren't trauma informed, and instead you're like, this is what she needs, this is what makes her feel secure, so I'm going to let her do this. So that's a great example. Thank you. Yeah.
Do y'all let her have the junk food?
Yeah, it's one of the.
We try to get healthier versions of some things, but she loves Slim Jims. That's one of her comfort things, and Takis.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where we really we try to encourage her to eat healthier things, but it's a very dicey road because of her her insecurity about her body. So it's like a subtle suggestion thing where it's I really like these ones because I can eat them and I don't feel as bad. And that's the sort of thing where it's we get the junk food to be slightly less junk.
Yeah. Super interesting. Did you ever hear of
So we thought we were doing the right thing with our kids at first by putting the snack basket out.
Okay.
But we have snack times.
Okay.
So that's kind of been an issue, meaning that we had a good intention, you know what I mean? But our snack times were still set because I was like, well, trauma kids need schedules.
Yes, they need boundaries.
Yes, right. So I think that was the best thing we could do at the beginning. So we're a little less stringent on that, but it was you get 3 snack times a day, and here's the snack basket. You can see it all the time and everything. But and this is before we know anything about TBRI. But again, so you could be halfway right.
We are just doing our best.
Yeah.
So you're saying you wish you hadn't even had the snack times. You wish you would have told them it's free range. Is that what you're saying?
More so.
Okay.
Something that might help with that our friend actually does with her kid, who is autistic and his meds make him really hungry all the time and everything. Their rule is all the time, no matter what, you can have a piece of food. No matter how much you want, it's always available. You have to
kudos on the
No, thank you so much for sharing. So I did want to mention that, as most of you are familiar with, so the reason why it's so difficult to identify trauma responses is because they simply look like really poor behavior. So a child with trauma in their background is not going to come out and say, I'm afraid of the dark, I need another nightlight. They're going to just get out of bed 12 times a night. They're going to be loud and wake up siblings. They're just going to do things that seem like really poor behavior and are really annoying. So that's why this is so complicated, because you have to put together tiny little puzzle pieces to figure out what's a trauma response and why it's there and what you can do to help, because the child, it's not really their responsibility to be able to say to you, I'm afraid of the dark because before this is what happened to me in the night, so I need X, Y, and Z. They're not going to be able to do that. Last, we kind of jumped ahead to examples, but last is a lack of physical touch. So, who heard what I was talking about in this video? Okay, is it hard with that talking? Okay, I'll play one more time. In the first 3 seconds, in the background, if you can weed out the women's voices, you will hear hundreds of babies crying. Ready? Oh, shoot. Okay, I'll try one more time. So when I first got that video, I didn't even hear the babies crying. And I thought all the good things about that video. Oh my gosh, look, she's so cute, and she has a toy and a friend. And then I went through my master's program, and I stumbled across that video years later, years after adoption. And I realized that my child had been one of those babies. My child had been one of those babies crying. I'm going to assume with hundreds of babies in cribs in a room, I'm going to assume there's crying 24/7. My child was a baby whose brain developed with synapses saying, when you are crying for attention and physical touch and love, you will not get it. And I can't even blame them. Who could take care of hundreds of babies? They're doing the best they could. But that was another puzzle piece for me, that little video, that little clip. When I am walking out to the garage sometimes and I have Amazon packages under both arms and I'm trying to open the door handle with my elbow, Ava will come up and give me a hug. And occasionally I will say, can you please get the door for me? You know, like occasionally it is annoying. And she doesn't take it well. If I said that to my son, he would go, oh, I'm sorry, Mom, and open the door. But when I say that to Ava, she doesn't take it well. Me not reciprocating her physical touch is doesn't go well with her. She needs it. She needs it when she wants it. And I have 2 kids older than her. I can say that at age 9.5, emotionally, she's more like a 5 or a 6-year-old. She wants to be sitting on me all the time. And that video was a little puzzle piece to help me figure out why and what I need to do. All right, so moving on. Once actual safety and felt safety have been established, and only then can an emotional connection be established with your child. This is Maslow's middle level, and it's referring to, psychological needs, bonding, attachment, and belonging, which are huge for adoptees, as you guys are familiar with. It's, the words under here are friendship, family, intimacy in older relationships, and a sense of connection. So this one's a huge one, and it's complicated. So all adoptees, you can raise your hand if your child is different, but all adoptees have insecurities surrounding unconditional love. There is even, I'm going to go off track for 1 second, but if anyone in this room has a domestically adopted child who was adopted at birth, and you're curious as to how that, if you adopted your child on day 1 to me afterwards. I'm not gonna go down this path, but it's called the primal wound, and it's really interesting. So talk to me afterwards if you're interested in the primal wound. But, so I don't know if that applies to any of us, but all adoptees have insecurities surrounding unconditional love. And when they, again, in my family, that's sometimes when I get a little snappy, which I sometimes have to. When I sometimes get a little snappy, that, my 2 biological children with no trauma, they barely even recognize that I'm getting annoyed. They don't care at all. But it throws Ava into a trauma response, because me being mad at her makes her insecure about my unconditional love or my lack thereof. So I do have to tiptoe around that with her, and it's hard. It is really hard as a mom of multiple children to not occasionally be able to get a little snappy and a little harsh when people need to get things moving. A really interesting one. I'd love to see a show of hands how many people have this in their own home. But a really interesting issue with adoptees that I see time and time again on some Facebook forums or pages that I'm a part of for adoptees is a fixation with their bio family. Does anyone have experience with that? Okay, less than I thought, but a fixation with bio family, that looks like adoptees forever being curious about what their identity would look like if they lived with the people that they felt they look exactly like and who would understand them better. For my child, of course, this even is that we're a transracial adoptive family. So thank goodness my husband has black hair and tan skin, same as hers. So that's awesome. We actually get to say she looks like her dad, which is really special for her. But she knows that she does not look like her siblings who look like their parents. And she has a fixation with her biological family. And it rears its head when she's in a trauma response and she will say things about her biological family that could be really hurtful to me. Yeah.
So it's not my own child, it's my sister. She's adopted domestically. She's 21, but when she never had any contact with her bio family. But when she went off to college, she tried reaching out to me and got rejected. And it kind of sent her to a spot to where she not doing all the school, had to drop out. And I tried to tell my dad and my stepmom to go to do something to help her work through this thing. And they've kind of like buried their heads in the sand. So she's still dealing with it now, and I've tried talking to her about it. It's just she doesn't want to talk about it. It happens.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's awful for her. Yeah, I don't know how to address it because I don't feel like it's not my place to step in, but I also know where I can step in.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And as a non-adoptee myself, it is very hard for me. I can't pretend to know how it would feel to not have links to or feel wanted by or interested in by someone who shares my biology. I honestly can't imagine how it feels. So this is a really common issue amongst adoptees. When thinking about establishing this emotional connection, pillar 2, with your adoptee, 3 words, I've come up with 3 words that I think are the 3 keys to this. One is self-confidence, not vulnerability, validation. So self-confidence, validation, and time. So the self-confidence piece is, you know what, actually I have a perfect story to tell you that embodies all 3 of those words, self-confidence, validation, and time. I'm telling a lot of stories about me being snappy with my kids because those were like the perfect example stories. Please know I'm a really nice mom, I swear. But one night I was getting Ava ready for bed and she was lollygagging and dilly-dallying around and trying to do everything she could to avoid it. And I said to her, "Hey, right now, brush your teeth." And that was all it took. And she started to go into a trauma response and kind of a fight, flight, freeze, and she had, tears in her eyes, and she was like, it actually wound up being one of the worst ones I've seen. This was probably a year and a half ago. Her body went rigid. She completely disassociated, wasn't even hearing anything I was saying. And so after a couple of minutes of trying to get her to brush her teeth, I just scooped her up and I put her in her bed and I laid with her in the dark. And she had tears running down her cheeks. And she started to say to me, again, hurtful things that are a fixation with biofamily. She started to say to me things like, "You're not even my real mom. I wish I had never been adopted. I miss my birth mama," which is what we refer to her biological mamas. "I miss my birth mama." And I decided in that moment that this was near the tail end of my master's program. So I knew what to do. And I decided in that moment I was going to 100% validate her. It took self-confidence. That's where the first word comes in. It takes self-confidence in the parent to not get your feelings hurt when your child, who you give everything to, everything, who you have given such a good life to hear them say, "You're not my real mom," it's awful. And it takes self-confidence to know that that is not how he or she actually is. So I decided in that moment to validate her, and that was all I was going to do. And I said to her for the first time, "Your birth mama misses you too." And she had never thought about that before. And she went perfectly still. And she had been like shaking. Like, it was just a really intense trauma response. She went perfectly still, and I said, so then I ran with it. And I said, "Your birth mama misses you every day, right?" And I had her attention. She was listening. So I ran with it, and I said, "Should we pretend to make a phone call to birth mama on the phone? And should we tell her all about you?" And she nodded her head yes. And I spent the next 10 or 15 minutes speaking into the dark. 10 or 15 minutes is a really long time. I spent the next 10 or 15 minutes speaking into the dark, telling birth mama on my hand phone every single thing that I could think of about Ava. Everything. Her friends, her school, her teacher, her siblings, her extended family, her sports, everything I could think of. And all about how wonderful she is, and all about how proud of her she would be. And I thanked her for gifting me this incredible gift of Ava. And in the end, her nervous system was completely reset. And she drifted off to sleep. And I do not get it right all the time. There are times when my life is moving too fast and I am incapable of responding in a trauma-informed way. But that night I did nail it, okay? I would say that was a turning point for her. Up until that point, she had been going into a trauma response over little things, probably 2 to 3 times a day. And after that night, I noticed a shift in her. And she now, it's been about a year since then, a year and a half, she's now, I would say she trauma responds, and I have to take a lot of time to respond to her appropriately about 2 to 3 times a week now. That is a huge improvement. It still plays a big role in our lives, but it is a huge improvement. And I did see that night as a turning point. I had the self-confidence to brush off the really hurtful things she was saying. I took a deep breath. I validated her for a really long time, and I allowed her to fixate on her birth family, and I validated it. And then the last word that I said is time. So it is inevitable, and it is unfortunate that being trauma-informed takes time. And time is something that we don't have a lot of. That night, my husband happened to be home and in town, not away for work. So if he hadn't been home, I would have rushed through bedtime and I wouldn't have been able to do that. It also happened to be like 7:30 p.m. We hadn't had an activity till later that night, I had the time to say, oh, I could spend 15 minutes doing this. If it had been 9:30, I wouldn't have done that. I would have just rushed through bedtime, and it was a huge turning point for her. So self-confidence, validation, and time, those are the three keys in my life, and I think a lot of you can relate to this, in creating an emotional connection with a child who pushes you away when they are most upset. It is hard. A lack of vulnerability, a child who does not feel comfortable being vulnerable, it just looks like defiance. That's all it looks like. Looks like really, really poor behavior. And that's really hard to deal with. Like I said, time, and validation even when it feels insulting. Does anyone have any examples to share? I know this is like a little private, so. Yes?
If you want, and full disclosure, I'm a birth mom who works for DSS now. It's a weird place to be, but I've also worked in private adoption also. And there are kids that have not come from a trauma background also have the same wound, not being connected to their birth family, because it's physical, we feel it in our bodies that we are not connected with the, where we were. Physically. So like, I have a story of a kid I was working with in private adoption, Mother's Day, everybody's getting ready for church, adoptive moms thinking, oh, this is my day to be celebrated, kids in the bathroom, getting ready, and is pulling the towel rack off the wall, just because he feels that whatever's going on in his body that he can't explain. So I'm just gonna recommend to you guys a book it's written in 2009, it's an old one, but it's called Hospicious Adoption by James L. Ritter, G-R-I-T-T-E-R, Hospicious Adoptions. And it's just coming from a place of honoring the whole adoption triad, and just when we talk, some of it, DSS land, some of these birth parents are gone, they have passed away. It's really just about honoring that place of where these kids are coming from, and when you're just in everyday conversation, just speaking positively about everybody, about yourselves included, because adoptive parents are pouring out so much, you can forget to do that also. But anyway, it's a good one, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, a little bit of a complicated thing that I think you might have some answer for this. Our daughter, has known of her, biological family. She has connections to, all of her siblings, and she knows of her, dad and her mom. We have a hard time with the validation process because, rightfully so, she very much, disdains her parents. There are times where she speaks a little bit more kindly of her mom, because we talked to her about her mom is also a victim as well. But it's been a little bit difficult because there are times where I do want to be like, yes, your mother and father absolutely dropped the ball. They did not even close to it right. But I don't think that's what she needs to hear. So what is the validation, what do you think the validation for that feeling is? I think we normally end up landing on, you have the right to feel like that, not necessarily that you should.
That's validation, yeah, absolutely, yes. Validation just means, it doesn't necessarily mean my example, which was validating how much her birth mama thinks about her and misses her. Validation is just validating your child's feelings. That's all it is. So mine is validating the fact that she misses her birth mama, and we don't have any information on her. So I do like to tell the story and feel that her birth mama thinks about her every day. But if you have more information than I have, which it sounds like you do, validate what your daughter feels. Yeah, that is validation, and that's fair.
So
yeah.
you don't think it would be a long-term effect to encourage that sort of anger?
That's so interesting you say encouraging, because I meant to close my story about the phone into the darkness by saying that if I hadn't been trauma informed, I know that I would have thought, if I validate this, I'm just going to encourage her to obsess over this. That's what I would have thought. I know myself. I would have thought, if I don't nip this in the bud, I'm going to perpetuate this cycle. But in reality, by validating her, I almost released her of her sadness, or in your daughter's case, her anger, you saying, hey, that's not true, or hey, that's not okay to say, or hey, that's not valid, that will only build and build and build. So I do think, yes, do you feel the same way?
Well, they feel seen too.
It feels seen, and it's easier to sort of release anger or release sadness if you feel like the person you trust the most agrees with you
Yes.
and understands and hears you. So yeah, that's what I would say. I thought there was one more thing I wanted to say. That's all right. So now, once felt safety and emotional connection have been established, and only once those things are established with your child, can behavioral correction occur. So this is the main pillar that I'm like, listen, you can read about this in textbooks, and you can look it up on social media all you want, but until you are living it in real life, you cannot imagine how hard it is to not correct behavior right away. Especially if you're in a mixed trauma household where you have biological children who don't have trauma in their background, who they occasionally do need their behavior nipped in the bud, right? My oldest two children have hardly had a bad day of their life. When they do something naughty, they don't need me to establish safety and then establish an emotional connection. They just need me, especially my son. Oh my gosh, he just needs a swift, immediate, repercussion, and he doesn't do it again. So to have that in my house, and then to have a child with trauma who needs a full TBRI 3-pillar, intervention when she's having a trauma response, which again just looks like bad behavior, it can be very complicated. So until you are living it, it is very, very hard to understand how hard it is to push off correction until you, I'll make this faster. Push off correction until you have established the first two. Correction looks like, in the first two top levels, confidence, achievement, respect for others, morality, acceptance. This looks like just socially acceptable behaviors, right? Like I said, it is easier than done to put off behavioral correction. It looks like creating boundaries while still being trauma-informed, which is hard. Boundaries actually create a sense of safety. So to create boundaries, to have some rules in your home, but then to still be trauma-informed while enforcing them is very, very complicated. And I don't have any magic tips and tools for you. Like I said, different parenting for different backgrounds for different children looks flat out unfair. That's what it looks like. It's unfair. To try to keep the dialogue open with your other children so that they can understand why you're treating one or two children differently is helpful, but it still looks unfair. And then also, extended family doesn't always understand. Who can raise their hand and say this? Yes, extended family does not understand TBRI, right? They don't understand why you wait until the child is completely calmed down, and then maybe an hour later you say, hey, by the way, remember when you did this? We can't do that in our house. You have to wait till the child is completely calmed down, till their nervous system has reset. And a lot of times, extended family doesn't understand that. And it looks really unfair, and it looks very permissive to them. Very permissive. And it can be, yes, and it can be very annoying when someone tries to tell you. All right, the most important and most difficult skill, this is my last slide. Being a trauma-informed parent to an adoptee is distinguishing between poor behavior and a trauma response. I've already talked to you about the tools. It's tiny little puzzle pieces. What can you gather about their past? How can those help you identify triggers? And what can you do to establish safety, felt safety, and emotional connection for your child when you see those triggers happening? It looks like poor behavior. They look exactly the same. That's why it's so hard to do in real life. We're all busy. It takes practice, and it takes trying to figure out little bits of your child's history. My last thought, when in doubt, err on the side of being trauma-informed. It creates connection, and sometimes you might be being a little bit too gentle.